Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor. Let's Get Writing is all about the writing process from creation to publication. And here is where we share the stories behind the stories and bring life to books, poems, and plays. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Catherine Taylor TV, and you'll have access to all of our episodes. My guest this week is a writer, performer, and director originally from Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador. Her stage plays have been produced in Toronto, Halifax, and Calgary, and across the island of Newfoundland. So please join me in welcoming Megan Greeley to Let's Get Writing. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good. It finally feels a bit like spring today here in central Newfoundland. How is it in St. John's?
Spring is slow. It's arriving slowly.
And I think that's the pain of living here, but it keeps us creative. And that's why I'm so glad to be here today to talk about plays. I have a huge passion for the theater, Megan, and I jump at every opportunity to host a playwright on the show. And I've welcomed Paul David Power, who wrote Crippled. And now I'm so pleased you're here. You have a recent book. It's called Hunger. Let me just bring it up in the screen, published by Breakwater Books. And tell us a little bit about this play.
I wrote this play a long time ago, actually. I first wrote it in 2012. And I was interested in exploring the relationship between someone who wants to do something that they deem morally good and correct and tries to be, kind of a savior, and their relationship with the person that they are protecting, and what happens when they are totally cut off from the outside world, and how the house that they are in becomes sort of a microcosm for society, while meanwhile society outside is breaking down. So I actually wrote it when I was living in Toronto at the time, and Toronto was flooding, and we were experiencing flash flooding. And I normally write in a bit of a fever pitch. Like, my plays come pretty quickly, and then I spend a long time editing them. And so I think I wrote the original draft of Hunger over the period of 48 hours. And I was just shut in my apartment, didn't know what was happening outside. And the only way that I knew that there was anything wrong outside, that flooding was happening, was that cockroaches were appearing in my apartment. I guess they were trying to escape the rising water. I was not living in a great place, but that was my only indication. And, when I finally emerged 48 hours later with this first draft of my play, I only then learned, the subways are flooding. There's been a lot of rain.
And that's amazing that you said that you wrote it sort of in a burst and in this intense time period, because I think many times a lot of our writer's work can get done in a similar way. There's something that compels, because we all know that, sitting down to write, people think like, oh, I'll write a book and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to be a brain surgeon next week. They don't realize what goes into writing a book or a play. And I feel like sometimes words are there and they're almost like weights. You have to pick them up and move them to the next room and work with it. So you had this draft, and you mentioned editing. And so what's that process like? Does it happen in your head, or does it happen in workshops? Tell me where it went from there.
So for Hunger, even though it was written very quickly, there was a long development process. And I always love to workshop things around a table and hear actors read it out loud, because the words on the page are not how they are meant to exist in a play. It's never the final form on the page. So you may have written a beautiful sentence that on the page is beautiful, it's poetic, it's lyrical, it's everything. And then an actor just physically cannot say it. So I was very fortunate to be able to workshop it a few times with some excellent actors to give me really good feedback. And it grew every time. So yeah, that was the process for Hunger, and that took place over, I think it was 2 or 3 years before it was first produced. So yeah, it was after the 48 hours, it was a sustained period.
And this is the part behind the scenes that people don't see. We see the play on the stage and everything that it takes to get there. And I was reading up on excuse me, on playwriting and thinking about it, because you have such a, kind of a finite area where you work on a stage, and then you have to work with words, as you said, like hearing them and having people work with them, and stage directions is very different from a book. And how do you feel working in that milieu?
I love theater because it's so ephemeral, and there's something really exciting to me about the challenge of writing for a confined space. In theater, it's whether it's a black box or whatever kind of theater you're working in, it's sort of a blank canvas, and you can turn it into any kind of space you want. And I like the challenge of that, what you can create, what kind of worlds you can establish in this, little room. And strangely, my first two plays actually are both set in a room. They're both like confined spaces. So for me, that's also kind of a metaphor for theater. It's like, what can you create in just this one box? So yeah, there's something that I find really exciting and immediate about working in theater.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you take a book, we can travel anywhere in a book, between the pages of a book, or even if you think of a screenplay, because we had touched upon that before we started to shoot. And I was thinking there might be similarities between writing for theater and screenplay. And you said to me, not really. So I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about that.
I actually wrote Hunger when I was studying for my MFA at York in screenwriting. And I thought, I'd been working in film a little bit as an actor and writing for theater. So I thought, oh, maybe I should try writing for film. And I found it very different. It's a very different medium to work in. And I ended up writing a play instead of my thesis. So there's something for me about theater that I love the community of theater, how many people it takes to put a play together. Writing can be such a lonely process, and then there's always this promise at the end of it that you are going to workshop it around a table with other people and have other voices and ideas involved. And it's not dissimilar for screenwriting, but the relationship between the screenwriter and the final product just feels like a much further gap to bridge than with theater. So I've been really lucky to be really involved in the productions of my work. So I feel really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's very true when you think of it. Many times, and I have some friends in the movie industry, writers, and you can be very far removed. Like your first draft can be sometimes not even the last draft. There's so many people and so many inputs. But interestingly, and you also are not just a playwright, you are a performer. And that may even add another element. Do you feel that that's beneficial? I may not be with everything you write, but at times when you are part of the play, does that make a difference to you?
I've had the experience of being in my plays and also sitting outside my plays and experiencing them as an audience member. And I've seen, tremendous value in both for me personally and creatively. But I am really grateful that I started as a performer. I did my BFA at Grenfell in theater and acting. And that experience of learning an actor's tools and being on stage has informed a lot of my writing, actually, because sometimes you, as an actor, you get lines that just, they don't make sense to you, or you're like, I don't know if the character would do that. And so a rule that I use now for myself is that if I wouldn't want to say that on stage, I'm not going to write it. So, and I don't mean that in terms of like challenging material or anything like that, but it does make me more aware of the actor's job and what they can do and how they can execute it, and to give them things that help them do that. You know, if the character needs a certain arc, like how can I help the actor get there? So yeah, I think that coming to writing from a performance background has been really valuable for me.
Do you write character descriptions of your cast?
No, I don't. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I know some playwrights do that and some don't. I usually I describe the age where that's important, but otherwise, no. I think that I don't want to be too prescriptive about the character, and if the actor can't figure out who the character is based on the text that I've written, then you know, I'm not going to describe a character in the beginning as, you know, energetic, bubbly, shy. That hopefully will come across in the text.
I think, and I remember when I was working on my screenplay, that was something that I came across. And I did work with a very good editor, Ken Chubb, out of Toronto. And he said, like, your characters should be able to know, don't go overboard with descriptions of telling them what they have to do. That's part of their job and part of their creative process. So you hit on that again. A play, is it like a living thing? I mean, is a play ever done? And with a film, it's done. It's filmed and it's done. But a play is produced by other groups and you go and see it or you're doing it. You know, can you still change a play after you've written? Does it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're still cutting and changing Shakespeare plays all these centuries later. I think that even after a play has been published, you're right, it is a living document in a way. And anytime it's, you know, approached in a rehearsal space, the particular group working on it are going to have different ideas and a different approach to it. And, you know, times change. And sometimes we need to edit the text to make it relevant, to make it make sense in our current world. So there's something exciting about that to me. I'm sure that even though Hunger is, you know, bound and published now, that if it ever goes into the rehearsal space again, I'm sure that many lines will change. And that's exciting.
Yeah, but it's there, and the actual, I have the book. I enjoyed reading it, but you know, it's there as kind of this was it, and still I would say the main focus and intention of the play wouldn't change, but some things that within it I could see those evolving. It seems like it would be a natural process in theater. Is it common for a play to be published? You know, I don't see that many of them, but I love to see them.
There are definitely, you know, publishing houses that specifically focus on plays, but I don't think that we don't have a culture where people go purchase a play to read it. We go see a play, but we don't have this a culture where we buy it and read it at home privately. So I love purchasing plays. I love reading plays. It makes me excited about picturing what they're going to be. But yeah, I think that you know, not a lot of plays get published. I would say a lot of plays that are produced never see print, unfortunately. So I feel really grateful that Hunger has been published.
Yeah, we'll thank Breakwater Books for that, for sure, in doing that. And it's interesting that you would say that, because as I'm thinking about it, where would I go if I wanted to buy a play? I maybe online would be where I would start. I know you see lots of scripts, but to actually get them in a book, and of course, you know, most of us grew up with a big volume of Shakespeare. We all had those things going through high school, but then to see modern playwrights. And what is kind of, if I was to say, well, what is the state of playwriting in Canada? And I know that's broad and you can only answer it from your perspective, but do you have a lot of friends across the country in the industry or even in our province?
Yeah, I've worked with lots of playwrights in playwrights units, and you know, people that I've connected with over the years. And I'm really excited about the state of playwriting in the country. I think that theater has been changing a lot over the last few years, and we're having really important conversations about what kind of stories we're telling and who should be telling them, and who is not represented on our stages and should be. So I think that, those are all really exciting and necessary changes that are slowly happening, unfortunately too slowly, but they are happening. And I'm excited about where theater is taking us. I think that we're, you mentioned having a big copy of Shakespeare. And I think that, when I was young, really young, I thought that theater was Shakespeare, but theater is so much more than that. And I hope that we can start changing theater and telling different stories so that people who are coming up through, school, through high school, don't just associate theater with Shakespeare. There are some beautiful stories being told by immigrants, refugees, people of color, Indigenous artists, and those are, so important. And I'm so happy that they're coming to the stage.
Mm-hmm. And it is true that it has lagged behind, I think, in terms of certain, I don't know, industries, maybe just employment in general, to see theater become more diverse. And we are, seeing it in film as well, which is great. And I think, again, of Paul David Power, the work he did in writing Crippled, and bringing many of those things directly in front of us and get us thinking of what theater can be. Very exciting. Now, what are you working on now?
Right now, I am working on a play that I received an Arts and L grant to write. It's a play that is about two queens who are married to each other. So it's sort of a look at how queer bodies fit into the monarchy, if they do at all. And it's also a comedy. So even though it's tackling some tough subject matter at times, I think that I'm trying to approach it with some levity. So I'm working on that, and I'm working on a musical for commission with Rising Tide Theater that I'm co-writing with my fiance, Mallory Fisher.
So it is a family business. Right. Yeah. And okay, now I think of Hunger, and I think of you writing a musical, and I'm thinking, wow, those are two really different feels. When you're working on a musical, are you also writing the music, or are you just writing the script? How deep are you going there?
My partner and I are pretty collaborative, so we there's definitely a fluidity in our approach, but I am working on the book primarily, and Mallory, who has a music background as well as theater, is writing the music.
Great combination. Yeah. That'll be interesting. And when might we see that? Is it going to be this year, next year?
Hopefully next year.
Yeah. Like we said, I think we've gone through that. The process of putting all this together takes time. What would you started at Grenfell College, and was that your first place that I know you mentioned York, but was it Grenfell first?
Grenfell first, yeah.
So how was that for you? And, where did you think you'd take it from there? How was that whole experience going there?
Like I said, I was really happy that I started in acting, and I wanted to be an actor. That's what I wanted to do when I was younger. And I was really fortunate that in my third year, I was cast in a feature film directed by Sherry White, written by Sherry White. And she wrote this fascinating character that I felt really grateful to get to play. And I think that part of the reason I became interested in writing after that was, I moved to Toronto, I had an agent, I was auditioning for things, and I didn't like any of the roles that I was auditioning for. And so I wanted there to be more parts that I was interested in playing. So I came at writing kind of from that perspective of, what other stories can we tell? Unfortunately in film and casting, we can be stereotyped really easily. I don't think I ever went up for any role without the word quirky in the in the character description. So yeah, I feel like writing came out of a hunger uh, for that, for different kinds of stories and approaches.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. If you're working in it and not finding what you want and you have the ability to do it, that is wonderful. And it's so nice that we have something here in the province to start people, because I remember when I was starting out, I wanted to do a theater degree, but I went to Acadia and did every theater course that there was. And it's so nice that you can start here now and things like this. And so much work across the province and theaters and productions going on. Very exciting. Well, for people out there who are now sitting there saying, well, I'm intrigued, I want to write a play. Do you have any advice for them?
I would say, listen, a really important element of playwriting is dialogue. And I think the challenge of writing a play is often how can you strike that balance between believable, ordinary conversation, how people actually interact with each other, and elevating it to a point of artistry. And I also think it's a really fun challenge to tell a story all through the words that we say, without the long descriptions that we're able to provide in prose, for example. So I think that just being observant and listening to the people around you, and hearing the nuances of how we speak to one another, and especially the subtext of what we're saying, like what we're saying on the surface versus what we're really saying underneath. So I think that is the initial, probably most important starting point for me if anyone wants to tackle a script.
Yeah, and you're right, dialogue and how we hear people say things. And then sometimes even what they say, you put it, as you say, you put it into a play and it doesn't quite sound right. And it's that underneath what people often say is not what they're thinking. So to get that, a very nice challenge. And what about the industry in Canada? Um, I think I asked if you knew a lot of people, but I mean, how do people earn a living as playwrights?
They don't. I think that unfortunately, playwrights aren't paid very well. There's not a lot of money in it. And so I think for myself personally, I've been able to carve out a living because I, like many other Newfoundland and Labrador artists, do multiple things. Like I also act, I also direct, I also work in arts admin sometimes. So I think that it's hard to just be a full-time professional playwright. I don't know if there are many in Canada. I hope that we can start paying writers more for the work that they do. I'm currently reading a collection of Patricia Highsmith's diaries and notebooks, and she's talking about back in the 1940s when she sells short stories, what she's getting paid for them, and sometimes she gets, $800, $1,000, and that's not much has changed, unfortunately, in the 80 plus years since Patricia Highsmith was selling her stories. So I do hope that someday we can value, writers and the immense amount of work that that goes into it, and start paying them more. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a dilemma often in the arts, and we need the arts. The world would be very flat without what the stories that are told and the books that are written and the films. I think it's so important that, and I have to get this in here, that the government recognize this and offer support to artists, which I know they do, but it can never be enough. It takes a lot of bravery, I think, to look at this industry and say, this is what I'm going to do, what I'm going to be, and, having to work so hard to survive. And, so we do need that support, and I can't say it enough. Support the arts, but we can also support by attending. And I think at times that people don't realize the importance of buying tickets to the theater, supporting our arts and culture centers. And really, I often don't, I mean, I care what's there, but I often don't care. I just want to go. And especially COVID has taken us from that habit. of going and filling theaters. So now is the time to step forward, we hope, and attend and support more. You can never walk out of theater and you'll walk away with something. You always will. And it's wonderful that we can go back in there more often now. Now, modern playwrights, are there any have you had any, I guess, mentors or things you aspire to? Anyone out there who has influenced you?
I wouldn't say that I've had one mentor throughout my career, but there are so many writers whose work I really admire and who I've been really lucky to sit around a table with and receive feedback from. We have some amazing playwrights just in this province. Paul David Power, Robert Chafe, Megan Gale Coles, Bernie Stapleton. It's a long list of writers. Sandy Guzman. So I feel like I'm lucky to have a community of really strong writers around me just in this province. And I'm learning from all of them all of the time, every time I see their work. And I'm excited about the future of playwriting in this country for sure.
Yeah, I am too after talking to you. You've been very inspiring, and I hope we've touched the hearts of people who are watching this show. And please share it, leave comments. And you mentioned Bernie Stapleton. I have done shows with her when they were starting the Mill Girls, which is a theater festival, a feature play in the theater festival here that they've started, the Kitchen Party Theater Festival, coming up again this summer, and festivals all over the province. Let's get out there and support them. And folks, I'm not sure when you're watching this, but there's always theater happening around you. Get your tickets, get involved, and think about people like Megan Greeley and the wonderful work they're doing to create this for us in our country. Thank you so much, Megan. I really appreciate your time. Any final words I'll give you to close the show?
Just thanks so much for having me. It's been a joy talking to you about playwriting. It's been a treat.
Thank you again so much, and thank you for joining us on Let's Get Writing. And please like and share the shows. Thank you now. Have a great day.